Can you hear me? Like,
Yeah, your sound is clear. You can share your
okay.
window. You can
Yeah,
share your
thank you very much.
presentation.
Okay. Yeah. So, my name is Mehboob Rehaman. I'm a PhD in physics, and my specialization was in medical physics. Currently, I am a medical physics resident at the University of Arizona. The affiliated hospital is Banner, so that's why it's called Banner University of Arizona Medical Center. So starting the topic that Asad Yusuf and other people gave me, it's about dosimetric calculation and scatter analysis. It is basically chapter 9 and 10 of Dr. Khan's book. That book is actually considered as Bible of medical physics, radiation therapy. Yeah. So uh, I would distribute this talk in two parts. Part one would be about dose distribution and scatter analysis, and second would be a system of dosimetry calculations. Most of this talk would cover the part one. Part two, honestly, I was not able to cover completely, so I will just give introduction about that. So in between this talk, if you have any suggestion, comment, or question, just let me know. I can stop and discuss with you. I'm also like a student, so it would be a kind of a mutual learning with you guys. So, uh, like all these kind of dose, like medical physics field, it is basically the dose, measuring the dose inside the patients. So it is not possible most of the time to measure dose distribution directly inside the patients. So all dosimetric data that is available today is based on the measurements that are performed in the phantoms, which are tissue equivalent material. And there are like various dosimetric quantities and methodologies that have been developed so far. So there are certain factors that are very important to know, and those factors are like basic parameters to calculate the dose inside the patient. So these factors are like phantoms, depth dose distribution, the idea of percentage depth dose, tissue air ratio, and scatter air ratio. I will explain all these. Basically, this whole topic covers all these five factors for the dose calculation. So starting from the phantoms, in radiation therapy, it is hardly possible to measure dose distribution directly inside the patient. So therefore, those measurements are performed in phantoms. These are tissue equivalent materials. They have the similar electron density like human tissue, and they give like the measurement just equivalent to the measurements in the human tissues. So these phantoms, uh, the most common type of the phantom that is used is the water phantoms. They have similar absorption and scattering properties in terms of electron density. The second reason that water is used for the as a replica of the human tissue is that it is universally available and its calculations are reproducible. Dosimetrically important quantities, all those quantities which we will discuss in this talk are measured in using the water phantom. These are requirements of the some technical reports like TG51 is most commonly used in USA, and there are IAEA reports as well, and those recommendations tell to calculate to measure these quantities in water. There are other phantoms like solid dry phantoms, which are commonly called as solid water. They are commonly used in almost every clinic. They have the same effective atomic number of electrons per gram and mass density as equal to, as water. And in my clinic, I have personally calculated there is very little difference between using the water phantom and the solid water phantom. So this gives these so solid water gives very quick way to calculate the output of the machine. Then there is another phantom that gives more precise measurement. These are Alderson random phantoms. These are anthropomorphic phantoms. They are frequently used in clinical dosimetries. They are actually several sections, tissue equivalent material composed of a structure of the human body. They have different inserts in which like ionization chambers are inserted, and you can estimate that those are delivered to each organ or each part of the body. So they have materials equivalent to the muscles, bone, lung, and air cavities. So these are called Alderson random phantom, are mostly available in almost every clinic. So then, as like as the beam is incident on the patient phantom, like from the source, the observed dose in the patient varies with respect to depth. So this variation of the dose is very important to know in order to precisely give calculation of the observed dose in the patient. So this variation of the dose depends on different factors, including depth, field size, distance from the source, beam energy, and beam collimations. The essential step in dose calculation is to establish depth dose variation along the central axis of the beam. So this relationship between this variation along the central axis of the beam is expressed in terms of the percentage depth dose. So commonly, this is called as PDD, or just represented by P. So this is basically a ratio between dose at any depth in the phantom divided by the dose at a reference depth, and it is expressed in the percentage. So the in clinic most of the time we use the maximum dose, and maximum dose is derived from the same expression in terms of the PDD. So PDD curve, this curve, you most of you might be familiar with this curve in every annual quality assurance test of the linear accelerators or Cobalt 60. You will get these kind of curves, which are called percentage depth PDD curves. So these are like initially at the time of commissioning, the vendors they give us these curves, and then every year we validate the performance of radiation therapy machines based on the PDDs. Then there are like this PDD has further dependent is dependent on several other factors. Those factors are like primarily are three factors: beam quality and depth, field size and shape, source to surface distance. So we will briefly discuss these three factors that affect the percentage of those values. So, oh, yeah. So if you consider, this is one of the picture from chapter 9 of Khan's book. So PDD, percent of dose, decreases with depth and increases with energy beyond the maximum dose point. So initially you will see that the percent of dose will increase with depth in water, reaches to the maximum point, maximum value, and then decreases. And it also has changes with respect to the energy. Lower energy for a fixed depth, and lower energy beams have less percentage depth dose, and at the same depth, if you have higher energy, it would have higher value of percentage depth dose. So the reason is that like percentage depth dose is expressed in terms of the penetrating power. If we have higher energy beams, they will have more penetrating power, uh, giving higher values of the percentage depth dose. Then a further analysis of PDD, it has two parts. One is the initial build-up region, and then the linear kind of linear attenuation decreasing curve, part of the curve. So initial dose build-up region is expressed in terms of a very common term known as karma, which is mathematically expressed as change of energy per unit mass of the medium. So this karma is derived from the letter kinetic energy released per mass in the medium. So this is basically energy that is transferred from photons directly to the ionizing electrons. So if like, for example, if beam is entering from this side, from the left side in the phantom, you will see all of the energy photon influence is transferred to the electrons, and karma would be maximum at the surface, and then it will increase in a linear fashion. Uh, at the same time, because like at the surface, very little energy has been transferred, so dose would be minimum until it would increase to the maximum value. And after the maximum value, you will see that the absorbed dose curve would be more at a certain depth, at a given depth, and karma would be a little less. So this karma is very important term and important quantity because it gives a concept of the skin sparing effect. So that's why if we use higher energies for the deep-seated tumors, we can have a skin sparing effect. But for lower energies, because less penetrating power, lower values of karma, the skin sparing effect would be lower. So that's why like higher energies are used for the deep-seated tumors and low energies are used for the superficial tumors. Then there are like second dependence of PDDs on field size and shape. There are two type of field sizes. One is the geometrical field size and other is the dosimetric field size. Geometric, geometric field size is defined as the projection of the distal edge of the collimator on the plane that is perpendicular to the beam axis. And the dosimetric field size is defined as the distance intercepted by a given isodose curve on the same plane that is perpendicular to the beam axis. Most of the time it is 50% of the isodose curve, and you can calculate the dosimetric field size from that. In this book, wherever the field size is used, it is geometric field size, not the dosimetric field size. So PDD depends on the field size increasing. If field size increases, it would increase the percentage depth dose. There are like the obvious reason that at the lower energies we will have more scattering, and scattering contribute towards the higher value of PDD. Field size dependence is less prominent for higher energies because in higher electron energies, production would be more forward peaked. So that's why we will have lesser scattering contribution. Okay, and then the continuing the field size and shape dependence. PDD data for radiation therapy, mostly like the standard data is tabulated in terms of the square fields. But in clinic, we use the rectangular fields or irregular fields that in the routine clinical practices. So there are different methods to convert the irregular and irregular fields to the square fields. So this method is called equivalent field parameters. So there are certain formulas like area to perimeter ratio equals the both sides of the rectangular field divided by 2 times length plus width of the field. Similarly, for the square for the equivalent square, equivalent circle can have the same area as the equivalent square. So you can calculate from this formula irregular field equivalency. And then the last factor is the source to surface distance dependence of PDD. PDD will increase with the increase in the source to surface distance because radiation follows the inverse square law. So this plot from here we can see that the relative dose is decreasing with respect to distance from the source. So this drop, if you see a drop of the relative dose, it's very sharp in the start for the lower distances and slower at the longer distances. So in that case, like obviously, like to achieve this benefit, we can PDD is recommended to have at a larger distances to have the less decrease in the relative dose. But if we are at the farther distances, inverse square law would be applicable, and there would be more scattering, and we will not get the accurate results in the dosimetry. So that's why we have to have an optimal SSD for the clinical practices. Typically for cobalt 60 machines, 80 centimeter is used, and for higher energies, linear accelerators, the reference SSD is 100 centimeter. So for like in actual practices, for example, if you are treating a patient, so patient anatomy is not uniform as the like the phantom or some other fabricated of material. So patient's anatomy is different from different directions of the beam. So SSD would be different from for those directions. So that's why a Maynard F factor is used for this purpose. So Maynard F factor is the correlation between different SSDs. For example, F1 is SSD in the first part of the picture, F2 is SSD in the second of the picture, and you can incorporate these two factors in terms of the depth in the phantom to calculate the F factor. So F factor is applied in the dose calculation, and you can have like the adjustment of the varying SSD. So far, like we have discussed phantoms, depth dose distribution and its dependence, and percentage depth dose and its dependence on different parameters. Now there are two conventional ratios called tissue air ratio and scatter air ratio. These are also important factors in the dosimetric calculations. So I would define these two briefly. Uh, Tissue air ratio. So tissue air ratio is the ratio between dose at a certain depth in the phantom to the dose at the same point in air. So if we will, this tissue air ratio will eliminate the SSD dependence of the percentage depth dose. Concept of tissue air ratio has been further refined to incorporate not only the rotation therapy but also isocentric techniques uh, and irregular fields. So basically, initially, this tissue air ratio was defined for the rotation therapy, as I discussed in the previous slide, that when we have a rotation therapy, the SSD would not remain constant throughout the rotation of the gantry. So that's why TAR would be applied to eliminate that factor. And then the finally scatter air ratio is the to calculate the scatter dose in the medium, because there would be lots of scattering because of the density of the material. So this is also defined as the ratio of the scatter dose at a given point in the phantom to the dose in the air. Since scattered dose at a point in the phantom is equal to the total dose minus the primary dose, so in that case, like SAR scatter air ratio mathematically would be equal to difference of the two TARs, one TAR for a given field size minus TAR for the 0 by 0 field size. Means you are just eliminating the contribution of the point. So these are the, again, starting from the first slide, dosimetric calculations. So these are 5 important quantities. Based on these quantities, traditionally or conventionally, we can calculate the dose inside the phantoms. And basically, these calculations are basically defined for the lower energies, not for the higher energies as these days, like cobalt 60 was used. For the current linear accelerators machines or higher energy machines, there are more factors that need to be discussed. Actually, those are part of the next topic, chapter 10. Those would include tissue phantom ratio and tissue maximum ratio. So I guess I will maybe next time I will be able to cover those further topics with you guys. So far I could prepare only these brief introduction about dosimetry calculations. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you for giving me opportunity to share this with you guys.
Okay, anybody have any question? They can unmute themselves and they can ask a question to Dr. Mehboob. Okay,
Thank you, sir.
I
Yeah, I
guess we
guess.
don't have
Yeah,
any
I guess.
questions, so you
Mhm.
can continue, sir, if you like to share anything, as I can see your
No,
slide.
like just yeah, it's very exciting with you talking to you guys. As I mentioned, like this was my first time. I've been here for like, last 10 years, so PhD entering in the medical physics program. Maybe at some stage I will talk to you guys again how I ended up in the medical physics, because mostly people like students from our region like Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, so they always struggle to enter, and the requirements in USA are very like difficult to. So I was thinking to share someday with you guys how you can end up as a medical physicist in USA. So hopefully next time I will meet you guys again.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and thank you all for joining us. And we hope to see you all. Hopefully, we're going to have a next session on 31st August. Uh, the soft skills required for medical physicists. So this is what we're going to talk about, and the flyer will be shared soon. Thank you all. Thank you very much.